So let me introduce Javier Maestre. Javier, apart from a good friend, is it's lawyer of RootedCON. If I have to go out of jail, you need to call Javier. He's one of the best lawyers in this country, especially related to hackers. He has represented some RootedCON members that are not me. So apart from that, he has developed many interesting legal projects. He will moderate the panel, and now he'll tell you what it is about. We have Cristina Carrascosa, and we have Pablo, Fernández, Burgueño. They are very important people at their respective fields. But well, Javier, you have the floor and you can introduce them, okay? So thank you very much, Roman, for your kind introduction. And thanks, everybody, for being here this Friday afternoon before Hacker Night. I hope you join us at Hacker Night. And following the introduction of all the speakers, well, thank you very much for being here with me today. We have Cristina Carrascosa, who is a lawyer specialized in technology that works at Pix & Manson legal office. And she works in, well, like, for example, in the field of cryptocurrencies. We have Félix Moreno, who is really active in terms of cryptocurrencies, for example, and we have to congratulate him because he has become the counsel lawyer at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And we have Pablo, who has a degree in ICADE, and he has worked with bitcoins since the very beginning. He's a great speaker about cryptocurrencies, and he's an active member of DAOs. And he will talk a little bit on the fly about this, because with this nightmare of acronyms and that blockchain smoke that surrounds us all over the place, well, it's a functional DAO, it's a functional DAO, and it's a role model for the future and for these initiatives. So first of all, I understand that in order to understand the DAO phenomenon, we need to put it into a context. And I would like to highlight a couple of ideas. How the technology progress has become into an improvement in the conditions. We have talked about the democratization of the technology. For example, we have the invention of the press, printing press by Gutenberg, and we have what we call the Internet galaxy, where we democratize not only the access to information but also the information production. And sometimes technology progress makes us face old problems and needs, but these things have to be solved in a new environment and under new circumstances. So, for example, with the Internet, the system of domain names, maybe it is the first institution. Now we'll get a little bit in more detail in what an institution is. The first institution that was developed until it became mature with the Internet. And this institution makes us face the problem of identifying the human initiatives. This is as old as human beings. So the DAOs makes us face another problem. It's a problem of how do we organize our life in society, in a society that basically, well, the assets are highly digitized and with a way of and with an operation that is far further away from territory. I don't like to get lost in epistemology or definitions, but for the ones that do not know DAO, well, DAO is the acronym of Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and it is defined as an organization that is managed through encoded rules in computer programs that are called intelligent contracts or smart contracts. I would like to set the differentiating aspects. A DAO is basically an organization that works based on a computing code. Taking into account the legal documents that are used in the business and industrial area, bylaws, contracts, and so on and so forth, this is all digitized so that DAO can work autonomously. So together with the increase of AI, the AI algorithms make these organizations more present. So the differentiating key, in my opinion, that make these organizations be successful is a digital environment. So the assets, valuable things that we work with, are increasingly developed in a just digital environment. So it doesn't have to be linked to a territory. Another key aspect is the usage of a remuneration system, like, for example, Bitcoin, that can't be controlled and that goes beyond the censorship attempts. Another key is the use of open and free software, both things. Free, in the sense that anybody can use it to do new things or different things, and open software because everybody has and can access the open source. So in the DAO, this allows the existence of forks. So it's a defense mechanism in front of the tyranny of the vast majority. This makes that if some people do not agree on what the majority does, the ones that have voting possibilities in an organization, they have the possibility of choosing another path and follow another way. Now we'll see a case study that it is under development. And as I've said before, some functioning rules that are included in our computing code, and this allows allows people to be more empowered, where we see how the states are squeezing people, and we see how the structures overwhelm their territorial distribution, and we see that at every single country in the world we have increasingly interventionist governments, but we are seeing a model of public power that is vanishing. This would be together with the economic policy, but this would lead us to other discussion. And so DAOs can become into an island, an empowering island of the person in front of these restrictions to individual freedoms that we suffer both from the public and private spheres. So DAOs have to be understood as a step beyond the institutional or the social needs. I always mention Francisco Capella, who applies the Darwin theories of evolution, and it is important. I would like to define what an institution is. I've read many definitions, but the one that I like the most is from an author that's called Mario Bardugo, that says that they are creations of human beings that, with a permanent character, try to satisfy social needs. So the DAO, it's an evolution, an evolution step within the evolution that is experienced by the different institutions that we are speaking about. So as a president, I would like to speak about the open and free software. Linux, it's some kind of pre-DAO, in the sense that it's a collaborative economy, collaborative environment that grows with the participation of many people everybody with their own interests and particularities, but with something in common. And here, I think that it's important to highlight that, well, there are authors as Ralph Merkel that consider that Bitcoin is the first DAO. If we understand, well, we were speaking about institutions, so money, it's an institution, it's an invention by human beings that let us satisfy the needs of exchanging goods and services, of acting as a value reservoir, and to have an idea of how much things cost. So this is an institution. Bitcoin is the money DAO, understanding money as an institution. Ralph Merkel and other authors, like for example Cecilia Namus, in his book Pattern Bitcoin, follow this line. So types of DAOs, there could be many. There are some of them that have an institutional content, like for example Bitcoin, that is the DAO of money. There are others that could be organized as if they were an NGO, and I like to put the example of a real democracy now that could be defined as a real world DAO, because it was an organization that was escaping from the traditional organizational structures recognized by law. I mean, they didn't want to be an association, they didn't want to be a political party, they didn't want to be a foundation, they wanted to be a citizen, and a typical citizen movement. And in the end, there was a conflict because of some people that created an association and put the name of Real Democracy Now, Democracia Real. Yeah, there was a claim, and the National Court judged, sentenced that they had to unregister that organization because of the name. So the law really supported the existence of this virtual end that was not regulated by any of the traditional legal categories. So we have some possibilities of action depending on the situation. Another category that we can see in DAOs have to do with the business world. They promote activities that could be developed by a company. I always like to put the example of BISC, that it's an exchange to exchange bitcoins. And Felix will explain in a bit what are the main lines and the main guidelines of how this DAO works. But there are other companies, other exchanges that are set according to the traditional structure, limited liability company, public company, and so on and so forth. And there are other DAOs that deal with specific functions or specific needs, like for example, there are a couple of them that deal with conflict resolution, especially in DAO sector. These are Claros and Aragon. There are people that think that there are some public actions that could be developed through DAOs. So we should not limit ourselves by the examples that we've seen. So the DAOs could replace any of the institutions that we currently have. So as regards to roles that we can find in a DAO, well, this changes as exactly the same as the number of DAOs. Because depending on what they do, their members will have to do one thing or another. But generally speaking, we could set a difference between the content creators that abide by intellectual property, like software images and logos, text, sounds, etc. And there are assets that need to be supported by a physical person, like for example a domain or patents and brands. And there has recently been a judgment by the European Office of Patents and Brands, where they refused a patent because it was done by an AI. So the patent offices said that that was original, that it could be registered. I don't know if you have ever registered a patent. You need to write down who has been the physical person that has invented it. Now they wrote down the name of the AI software, and they've rejected it. So what happens if the owner is a DAO and not a company? So this could lead to some problems. So social media owners, referees or mediators, and there are some conflicts with the real world that could mean some problems. For example, bitcoins in order to work, they need to have miners, nodes and miners, but basically miners that contribute machinery and electricity. So depending on how the DAO is organized, maybe there's a contract. A DAO, well, we'll see it right now. We'll see whether it is possible to contract a third party or not. Maybe it could be organized so that the work that has to be performed by these external suppliers is done, and the DAO should be organized so that these people are automatically paid, as happens with the Bitcoin and the miners. And now I'll give the floor to Felix so that he explains the BISC case and how they have organized all this in this decentralized exchange. Thank you very much, Javier. So BISC is trying to develop some functions that today are developed in the financial system by trustworthy institutions, banks, central banks, and regulators. And Bitcoin is making this in an increasing way, but it has been shocking to all the Bitcoiners that they are trying to work from a decentralized point of view, but in order to get into the system, to buy Bitcoins, the first thing you have to do is to go to a centralized entity that is called exchange house or stock exchange or exchange where things are bought and sold. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. And this has always been a complaint, theoretical at the beginning, but in 2013, when M&D Gox went into bankruptcy, we saw how vulnerable, or the vulnerability entailed by depending on trustworthy companies that control your money, your Bitcoins, and you had to trust on them in order to be part of the operation. BISC appeared as a reaction to the bankrupt of Medigox with the idea of creating a decentralized Bitcoin exchange. And in order to create a decentralized exchange, we try to follow a model that could be as similar to Bitcoin as possible. And this has some different aspects in terms of smart contracts. We shouldn't have an institution in the middle. But today we will focus on a very specific aspect, that is organization. The organization of this cooperative or of this entity that, well, it really doesn't have an entity, this instrument or institution that is used to make all the best collaborators agree on something and to create a software and social institution that let a decentralized exchange exist. First of all, because exchanges are vulnerable as human institutions. They are vulnerable to regulation. They are vulnerable to the bad practices of their creators. They are vulnerable to thievery, either through external hackings or any other type of hackings. Every month there's Bitcoin hacking, and very often there have been exit scams where the exchange founders have pretended to be dead, or they've disappeared with the funds that have been given to them. So this is part of the principle of, does every user control his money? Yes, every user controls his money, controls his data, because we are fully aware that every single week there's a massive robbery of massive data robbery at some institutions. It doesn't matter how many data protection laws we have. It's very difficult to avoid this when you have a centralized database with the information of thousands and thousands of users. Every user at BISC controls his money and his data, and they only share them with his counterpart, and we use smart contracts and software so that two people can reach an agreement to make an exchange. But, well, this is very good. But if there's a regulator and says, well, if this was done by a centralized company, the owner would come along and somebody would come and buy it, or the regulator would come and they will force them to change these parameters that are so important for a decentralized project. So the next logic step, which would be this next logic step, let's configure ourselves as a DAO so that we don't have intellectual property owner. Everything is free code. There's no CEO. There's nobody in charge of the project, and there's no responsibility that could be identified. But what happens? There are many projects like this one. You were speaking about Linux before. There are many collaborative projects, open source projects, but there's something missing there. And for example, what is missing is the capability of developing a paid economic activity. If you want to have good programmers and developers doing things in favor of your project during time, there are many people that could do some things for free. Many people can do projects for free at a specific moment in time, but to do it over time, you need an organization and you need a remuneration so that they can work on that. So how do you do that? Through a decentralized organization where we create different tokens that allow users to convey economic value to the collaborators of the project without needing to go through a common fund or a company. I don't know if I'm running out of time, but anyway. And how do we make decisions at the organization if there's nobody in charge? Through a voting system using these tokens, these BSQ tokens that represent in a meritocratic way the value that the collaborators have contributed to DAO, and this allows them to vote with a specific weight at the decisions that are made. And this is in the user's hands, and if anybody captured the project, the last way out, as everything is free and open code, if somebody does not agree with that, can escape and can create a parallel version without any kind of burden. And in the worst scenario, in a country, they forbade the usage of BISC. So following the BitTorrent model, well, it is a decentralized model that is independent. There is no common database, there is no common server, so it is highly decentralized. But if, however, they were considering the possibility of forbidding BISC at a specific country, they could always create local activity. So I would like you to explain the native token as a colored BTC to make a difference with other native tokens from other supposed DAOs. Well, BISC has never never launched tokens to finance. We've created native token that is a colored token. You put a label and you call them BSQs. They are still Satoshis. You can see them at the Bitcoin blockchain, but they have some added information that gives us the possibility of reading what they mean at a chain browser at BISC. We can use them to pay collaborators, and they are generated in a decentralized way when a collaborator asks for them, and this generation is approved through a voting of all the full DAO. Sometimes we need a qualified majority, and that depends on the situation. So the members vote. Well, we want the programmer that did this last month to be paid with X BSQs. So we colored some BTCs, and they receive this money, or this Bitcoin, sorry, and with this, in the BISC, that is an exchange house, they can exchange them for Bitcoins, and they can exchange them for euros, and he can use it, or he can use it to vote, or to put some bales that are used for security purposes in the DAO. I mean, they have multiple uses, and basically they're using the colored Bitcoin technology that already existed, but this is the first use case in such a versatile way that I've ever seen, because we have used them many times for example, USDT or Tether is a colored Bitcoin-based nominee, but it's not only used to represent something, but it's also used as a native token with multiple uses in the DAO. So I guess that there will be some questions and answers. So thank you very much, Felix. Anyway, The information is open in your hub, and through the BISC website you can access the documentation that supports DAO. So, DAOs makes us face countless problems. As Felix has said, one of these problems is the decision-making process. Basically, we need to arbitrate a voting system, and votes are usually not one person, one vote. They're organized around tokens. So this is because many DAOs are hiding some scams, some kind of ICO 2.0, where they preeminate or they sell some preeminated tokens. In the case of BISC, this is not the case. The tokens are created. But there's a case that, sorry Javier, I forgot that they are created and they are destroyed. Yeah, I mean, they are not around the place. No, when they are used for the DAO services, they are destroyed. These tokens are destroyed, so it's very difficult to accumulate tokens that could lead to an assault of the DAO. This is what has happened at the streaming platform, Steemit, sorry. It's a problem that's happening during these days. Steemit is a platform that has been created by a company that has been organized as a DAO like Reddit, where what they did was to, well, let's imagine there's a YouTuber, but as a DAO. So the point is that Justin Sun, who is the creator of sitcoin Tron, he said that it has a sitcoin. He said that he has bought the Steemit company, the company Steemit that had most of the tokens of DAO Steemit, and he has reached an agreement with Huorbit and Poloniex so that these exchange delegate the votes of the token they have in Justin Sun to create a change in the DAO protocol so that it can take all the contents to the blockchain to move from the blockchain of Steem to the blockchain of Tron. This is Justin Sun's plan. So the Steemit community has complained. They've said that they're going to make us forward in order to go on their own, and today, Friday, supposedly they are on the internet arguing about these aspects. So as we can see, the fact that we have a free and open software facilitates forks as a mechanism of defense in front of the tyrannies of the vast majorities could happen with this case of Steemit. And now I'm going to give the floor to Pablo, who will explain a classic situation. I'm sure that some of you will know about this, about hacking suffered by the most well-known DAO that was called the DAO. So Pablo, you have the floor, and you can speak about flash loans that we were talking about the other day. It's a very interesting topic, yes. Well, this that is being tackled by Javier and Felix, and that will be elaborate, and Cristina will elaborate a little bit more on this. Well, I've tried to explain to my parents, and I have not been successful at all. But I'm going to speak about something that has to do with 3 questions that I will ask you. And if you want, you can raise up your hand, and if you don't want, no worries. First of all, I think that we understand that we can have bugs in the software. Do you understand this? Okay, so has anybody here have bought cryptocurrencies at some time? And if you raised your hand, have you paid taxes? Okay. Manuel, who belongs to the tax authority. Okay, so now he has very valuable information, and it has to do with the things that we're going to see right now. In 2016, there was a very specific DAO that was called the DAO, THE DAO, okay? So in 2016, we created this, this DAO was created based on a smart contract that is basically a collection of computing codes that are installed in a blockchain, sorry, to execute the instructions for which it has been programmed.
Basically, this is software that does things for you. The DAO It's a specific organization, decentralized organization that was joined at the end of the day by more than 11,000 people. 11,000 was the number when things started to happen. To become a member of the DAO, you needed to fulfill a number of requirements. That is to say, code is the law. If not reading on the code, it cannot be done. 11,000 people joined in. They ended up being 18,000, and within that people, an IT guy was fond of playing around. He took a look at the code and he said, oh, I have interesting information and this may help me lift a high amount of money in cryptocurrencies. Therefore, I will go for that. How did he do it? The DAO was structured as a financing system for future projects. Those 11,000 people that had joined initially have introduced more than $160 million in cryptocurrencies. And this person, this IT guy, took out cryptocurrencies through mini DAOs. And what he did was very simple. He said, if I take out tokens, cryptocurrencies, the number of tokens in the DAO will not be leveled, and no one will notice it. No, and then I will do it. Okay, $1, $2, $10, $100, 1,000, 100,000, 1 million, 250 million, and then he said, well, I'm happy now. Well, actually, before that, some people found that out, and then they said, there is a very clever, very smart person, because he was the person who reached the objective. He is taking out money. And then many people raised their hands and said, let us do something to stop that. But it was too late. And later on, as Javier mentioned before, a fork was created aimed at avoiding that possibility of allowing, facilitating someone to take out that money. Those smart programs are likely to suffer from failings. So the IT guy could detect that failing and used it to take out money. When he knew that some legal action was going to be performed against him, he just followed a tweet. He said, I just follow the code. If you take me to court, I will take you to court too. If I took out the money, I took it because it was in the code and I just followed the code. So therefore, Vitalik Buterin was the creator of Ethereum network. He created the need to create a new Ether. A fork is a deviation of the blockchain, creating a second version of the blockchain, and from there, classic ethers is state, and then new ethers are created. Two blockchains created from one blockchain. That was followed by a number of legal questions, and I say, who can we take to court? The person who took out those tokens, those cryptocurrency, is an anonymous person. If we want to take someone to court, what court should we go to? What country should we go to? Those questions do not have an answer yet. Many propositions were made, but the question is still open. So the DAO is a group of people coming together and agreeing on a specific element. So we have now a group of 3 people. It's kind of a civil society doing something which is specific to achieve an objective. So each of us contribute our work and then get our proceeds depending on the work that we did. That's for DAO. And what happens with the flash loans? Imagine that you wanted to make money, and for that you need an initial amount of money. and then you borrow some money. There are DAOs in blockchain where people put at the disposal of others cryptocurrencies so that you can borrow them to conduct further actions. But for that, to get that loan, you really need to put a deposit or a guarantee. So decentralized DAOs allows you to get as much money as needed for some operations without using that deposit. So how much money can you get from that DAO? 1 million, 1,000 million, 2,000 million in cryptocurrencies? Yes, you can borrow that from them as long as you give it back quite soon, after some time, after performing a number of sequential operations where you are investing on a stable value cryptocurrencies, and then you just give that money back after making some profit on the way. And how much money can you make? Well, depending on the operations that you carry out. For instance, $360,000 was the amount of money that Analytica did. Remember that the DAO may change the history of finances. It is about getting a huge amount of money that you give back quite soon, and this is associated to a number of activities or actions that allow you to get a number of cryptocurrencies that you may convert into legal tender. It is a fascinating topic. I would highly recommend you to take a closer look at it and to learn more about it. And now, as I said before, many DAOs are kind of are hidden scams, such as ICO 2.0, 2.0. So if you take a look at DeFi, blockchain, fintech, ICO white paper, roadmap, multi-purpose, this is likely to follow under blockchain category. Well, to talk about the smoke of blockchain, there is nothing better than the blockchain cream that was advertised on the internet. So we have here this skincare cream and this skincare serum. It is blockchain cream promising miracles. If you set up a DAO with including tokens, and you need to buy those tokens with cryptocurrency or with other type of money, why do you need such a big financial investment? That is for the creators of the DAO, which is not decentralized but is actually centralized, as it was the case of the DAO. The DAO was created by a company, not by a decentralized entity. And also we should be careful with regulators. One of the main objectives is to set up entry barriers to the market. And when regulators use a safe harbor or sandbox, often they are just setting up conditions so that those who are already inside continue to benefit from the business that are making, and so that the third parties or new entrants are expelled. One of the main problems of DAOs is about the legal nature. So there is a resolution by the European Parliament 16th of February 2017 issues a number of recommendations to the Commission regarding robotics. That it establishes that the Commission has to safeguard or ensure the legal personality for robots. So there is no definition of robots. So robots is not only an arm in an assembly line. So for instance, many systems could be considered robots. And it also talks about legal nature, electronic legal nature. Well, the problem that we have with the legal nature is double. Could be either So if someone gets the DAO software, which is open source, may register it and say, well, this is my IP. Same as real democracy now. So now the DO may be able to put a claim so that that trade name can be eliminated, can be reversed. What happens with the legal personality? The owner of that software, who should he claim or put a claim to, because that has been built in an anonymous manner and we don't have the name, we cannot really identify the developer of the software. Also, compliance of the regulations. After the approval of the AML directive, the FCA from the UK issued a resolution establishing that they are considering applying AML standards to software manufacturers of decentralized wallets, manufacturers. So any kind of wallet for cryptocurrency will fall within this category, therefore we'll have to comply with all AML requirements. At the end of the day, they just decided to stop it and not to go ahead with it. So we should not forget what the governments are doing or may do in terms of complying or not with DAOs. So a programmer of a DAO that receives or whose main source of income is the DAO, what happens with him? Is he a self-employed person, or he works for someone else? What happens with the VAT? If a DAO charges commissions or fees to end user, what happens with the VAT? How do you report your file your taxes? I feel that DAOs are there to stay, and therefore, well, we will have to resolve all those questions as they unfold. And now, Cristina will tell us about the legal DAOs. And after that, we will open a question and answer session. Well, now I'm very happy to take the button, and I'd like to ask you 3 questions. How many of you would invest your own money in an investment fund such as the one that Pablo mentioned, aimed at investing in projects you believe on? So you decide on the amount that you want to invest. Keep your hands up, but I'm sure that as I move on with my questions, you will lower your hand. How many of you invest money on an investment fund together with 18,000 people more that you don't know? Okay, good, you are brave enough. And last question, how many of you would keep your investment if by the time you deposit your money, you sign some terms and conditions that say this may go wrong, and if something goes wrong, we are not accountable for it? 4 people. So Pablo, you are really brave. Do you know what corporate societies were created after the Industrial Revolution? Well, people check that when they invested their own equity and wealth, when things go wrong, their wealth is finally lost. And it is not only that, they have accountability to others. So if you've been working, you have your company, your home, and your wealth, your money. If things go wrong and there are some people affected, even if you were not a guilty person, still you are accountable for that. And someone decided and said, what happens if we create a corporation so that the corporation is accountable and so that my wealth, my private wealth, is protected, is secure. So having said that, you know what I do for a living? Well, I'm a lawyer myself. Well, I don't run anyone's party. Not exactly. Since 2012, we've been doing legal hacking as we know it. DAOs as disruptive element or entity are all right. Well, Pablo told you about what happened with the hacking of DAOs, and there was another hacking with Flash Loan where $350,000 were lifted. So these are imperfect systems and are hackable nowadays. What I do at my firm is legal hacking. That is to say, if you have a highly disruptive project such as a DAO, but you are not willing to lose all your money if things go wrong, you can do something which is very simple. That is to say, get your project, go visit a lawyer, knowledgeable about the law, finding a loophole, and then I say, okay, let us set up a DAO and let us make it legal. So therefore, you're taking advantage of the innovation or the benefits of a DAO, which is an online company, highly agile company online, and you also take advantage of a legal system that has been working for centuries now. Well, after the hacking of the DAO and the hacking of other environments, the crypto arena, some lawyers decided to create a legal AO. So this is a mix between a corporation and a DAO. So therefore, that DAO cannot be attacked legally by any regulator. That are the evil guys, but they have created a DAO that works, where the users of the DAO or the other users feel very comfortable, because at the end of the day, this is a highly agile structure where you may preserve your privacy, you may carry out investments in cryptocurrency, but if everything goes wrong, and I promise if things can go wrong, they will go wrong, in that case you are protected. In the technological world, and actually I've seen that, we lawyers, we were the evil guys, we were the bad guys. And they said, well, they told us that we were trying to make them legal. And I said, we just don't want legal, we want innovation. Now we are at the stage where people are starting to understand that an innovative project does not have to go against the legal system, because you know who will be the losers? Who do you think it will lose out? The regulator or those who set up a highly disruptive project? Well, losers will be those who always lose. So now we are starting to see that when people set up a highly technological project, the first thing they do is to contact the lawyer. It's not the last thing that they do, but the first thing. They go and say, we want to set this up, and then the lawyer says, you can do it in this fashion, this fashion, this fashion. And you can do that, and you will not have any future issues with the law. Because at the end of the day, we human beings hate two things. First, uncertainty. That is to say that prevents us from having a good night's sleep. Well, Pablo told you about hacking of DAO. Well, I took part in the authoring of a book, and my chapter was about DAO hacking. If you take a look at the law, any people affected by that DAO hacking, anyone could have taken to court the person who set up the DAO in the UK. We could have gone against the creator of the DAO, and probably this person would have been accountable for it in Spanish court. This is what I'm telling you about the legal hacking. The only thing you need to know is the law, because Pablo was saying, well, who should we take to court and where jurisdiction should we go to? If you know the law, you will find the loophole or the way to make people accountable. As I said, uncertainty first, and second, losing that has taken us lots of effort to achieve. You know what lawyers are there for? other than trying to resolve things when everything has gone awfully bad? Well, to help you, to help people set up a strategy to protect themselves, the initial stage of the project, so that in case things go wrong, do not go awfully wrong. I'm not defending the legal system. The legal system requires some type of shaking because we have laws and systems dating from Roman times, and I think DAOs have come to push the system, to shake the system a bit. But at the end of the day, I feel that this is natural evolution. Hacking of DAOs, hacking of flash loans are those things that human beings have to go through to realize that perhaps there is need for a change. Setting up a corporation and waiting for 3 weeks before your corporation is operational doesn't make any sense at all. That's why people go for DAOs. So the virtue is in balance. It is not a question about living in the Wild West where we've been seeing really crazy things happening. One of the reasons that's being said that no one took DAO hacking to court is because many of the funding that was put into the DAO came from anti-money laundering. The origin of that money was unknown or not clear. So that natural evolution, that mix between these highly innovative figures that provide no security whatsoever to users and a very stagnant system with lots of failures, but that has somehow worked. And that's where users will feel very comfortable, and then LAOs will become a mainstream legal instrument. Thank you very much, Cristina. With that, we finish the presentations. Thank you very much to all the speakers. And now we'd like to open question and answer. And if there are no questions or answers, we can debate it ourselves. Oh, I would like to make a comment. DAOs. DAO has no holder, but it has an owner. So going against the developer of an open source code that has been launched for other people to use it, I find that is evil. So if the solution in the case of an attack with no owner is going against the open source developer, it's very worrisome. But legal hacking is there. If you upload things to GitHub, you should be careful about that. Well, just a minor thing. In the case of the DAO, 13 warnings were issued about the vulnerability in the code that allowed the setting up or the creation of a sub DAO. When you are being warned 13 times that your code has a vulnerability allowing potential drainage of your DAO and you do nothing about it, and you feel that your deposit, your money is secure, and then in 15 hours, then money started to be taken from the DAO. So this is like very, very basic thing. Well, lots has been written about DAO. If you really want to get training or information about that DAO hacking, there is lots and lots written about it. So if you really want to invest in a DAO, please read the code and try to interpret it. If you don't know how to do it, hire someone to do it for you. Well, the issue was not a legal issue. The issue was an IT issue. So no legal issues there. No legal discrepancies, just an IT issue. Any questions? Well, if there are no questions, I have a question. I just don't want to introduce any ideology bias. I am an anarchist, and I believe in a model with a really small state where we can self-regulate ourselves with decentralized organizations where we all decide on the type of life that we want to live. My question and statement. I feel that states are reducing themselves, are shrinking, are losing power, because we rely on them less and less. So we are heading to a model of close organization, community of people arranging themselves and organizing themselves through a social contracts, and then establishing digital contract with other organization, creating number of intermediaries. Well, what do you mean by closed organizations? Well, I get together with people, share my mind, okay, we sat down, we sign a social contract. Have you read Islands on the Network from Bruce Stanley? I recommend you to read that book because it talks about the destructuring of the society. There is one known as Rhizome, which is a cooperation of people with alike minds, and they work for the same objectives. They relate with the rest of the world through intermediary lawyers and digital mechanisms. Do you think that that is viable? Well, that has happened historically. It happened in very many communities that lived in a kind of autonomous manner, that did not have any, so to speak, privileges, but they had specific laws. Well, universal rights and human rights were not the same for everyone. In the past, in Middle Ages, there were privileges and laws for the landlords and for the kings, and if you were a Jew, well, Christian tribunals. So Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice, it's about that. Roma populations, Roma communities here in Spain for a long time. Well, the interaction with the courts and with other social entities is done through the figure of the patriarch. So that has always been there. But the question is whether that is viable or not. The question is, can we do it in a fashion that is better, and so that we don't go back to the Middle Ages? We have dystopias that go crash, or the Age of the Diamond. Lots and lots of books telling us how this can be awfully wrong. And there are very many books written about how this can be done rightly and in a positive manner, so that it's not an actual utopia, but it's just an improvement. So before the arrival of the modern state, we are still living there. That came from the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was dismantled. Then the modern state came, and as I said before, well, the territory has always been key element. But as I say, there was always a link with the territory. Now the internet and digital society, it's leading us to organize ourselves in the form of networks. We may have networks of groups of interest that may get organized and interact with other networks. So therefore the social fabric and the law would be would weave themselves in the form like if it were a neural network. This is the future. It's a future, but I don't think I will witness that future. So this full mesh of institutions, I think it will take at least a few decades before we see that. We will have to continue supporting the slab or the pressure of the state and of global cooperation. I wouldn't be surprised that before we come to a globalized, modern, networked society, we will have to go through kind of cyber feudalism before we get or achieve that society that nowadays is a utopia. So, well, we are already seeing that interaction between the local municipal governments and the global corporations, for instance, through the regulation of Uber and skates. That type of regulation oftentimes is local regulation. We have those skates in Barcelona but not in Valencia, and vice versa. This is local regulation, this interaction with global corporations. You may think that they are evil, but in many cases they say, well, I just don't want to go to those places where I'm not wanted. So we are already seeing that interaction. And powerful central states are threatened by localism, decentralization, and they are also threatened by supranational entities. Spain has lost lots of powers and competences in the European Union, and then the US and EU have delegated many things in the World Trade Organization, even though we end up seeing some small rebellions such as those of Trump. But that play between hierarchies at different levels, it's already there. And it is very difficult to guess where we will end up. So I was a witness, and we are all witnesses on our day-to-day basis about the fight of local and state government against the owners of the internet that impose norms, probably most of them on the internet, and who make population follow them as they wish. So therefore, those companies are no longer guarantors. But now we are starting to see other type of organizations such as DAOs, where people who are no longer people from any specific country or company that are members of the world get together to organize themselves. Probably we will see an increasing number of this type of fora where a number of people sharing an ideology, lifestyle, whatever, organize themselves to realize a common goal. You know the type of DAO that I would like to see? A social media, let us say a simple one such as Twitter.
It could be open source, and it could be managed through a DAO. Yeah, well, out of everything that you've said, I'm drawing something that you all have in common. Although I don't look like that, I'm not a great supporter of the system as I have it. I think that when people say that we are starting the post-capitalism era, one of the reasons why I like the crypto world and the people that are inside is because they have a very critical thinking with the system that is established. So more or less anarchist. I think that this critical thinking would makes us evolve. So under everything we've mentioned, there's an underlying idea. There's a person that is upset of that growing control or wish of control that authorities, government have. Especially the freelancers feel that squeezing, and you can't move without regulators. I mean, you can't move without them knowing what you're doing. So it's some way of doing some kind of free rider. It's just about saying, well, I found an environment where I can find people that think like me, that we can progress, or that we can evolve without feeling that that pressure that is subduing us, so to speak. So I joined the crypto world for the idea that it was a way of pressing the system. It's like, hey, listen, we've been able to set an environment where there are some decisions, governments, etc., and you can't execute these decisions in our environment. So, of course, we have BISC and the impossibility of sizing tokens within a decentralized organization. So, to me, that idea that DAOs have, or the crypto world has, in order to put the established system at stake, to say that there are things that we can't do, well, I like it. So, is there any question in the audience? Yep. Alfonso, I would like you to say something about steganography. Hello, good afternoon. I had two questions. Well, you can answer them as you want. One of them is, if you see the future of the organizations that are distributed, 100% linked to blockchain technology? This would be the first question. And a more philosophic one, or conceptual one, I see that up to now, there has always been a great gap between the technology and legal world, especially when it's like, well, we're lawyers, we belong to the technology world, etc. But do you see a future where both fields, technology and the legal world, need to go hand in hand more than ever? Thank you. Regarding what you've said at the beginning in terms of blockchain, not necessarily. I understand that we can set a DAO without a blockchain. It depends on what the DAO does. Well, the blockchain is just a system to set up data. It is what it is. See a DAO from a database of a company, well, I can do it on an Excel sheet. Well, there are many ways to decentralize that have nothing to do with blockchain. We don't like hypes here. Well, I'm not a technician, but I'm sure that there are other ways of decentralizing. Well, the blockchain is a very specific solution that has been adopted in the Bitcoin case that for other structures, for centralized or decentralized systems could not work. What is a key aspect for DAOs is the usage of a cryptocurrency as Bitcoin, not a Bitcoin electron, but a Bitcoin, a cryptocurrency as a remuneration system. Because for the DAOs to be successful, well, this is what has happened with Bitcoins. The governments can't go against it, although they want to. For a DAO to be successful, it has to be as Bitcoin. It is really a DAO. The governments can't go against it. So we shouldn't try to set a limited liability company. We need to do something that can resist the censorship attempts by the government. Is Torrent a decentralized network? Yeah, it is, but it's not a DAO. It's a way of sharing information that neither uses information nor is a DAO. And it has other ways of funding. So this is why the use of a cryptocurrency, if you want it to be a little bit more than a collaborative project and a non-profit project, well, if you want to go one step further between a company with an economic system with smart contracts, I wouldn't know how to do it without blockchain and without a cryptocurrency. I truly agree. Regarding a second question that you've asked, I think that technology, historically, every time that it has brought innovations that have affected us all, first of all, we've had the innovation that has been used by a group of people, a more reduced group of people, if you want. After that, the regulator has accommodated that technology, and it is where we've had the capital flow in order to develop that technology, and secondly, the user mainstream. So I think that if they have to go hand in hand more than ever, I don't think so at all. I think that sometimes we feel a little bit special, I would say, when there's a technology innovation as blockchain. It is special, but it's very different. It's very different to the others. But we've seen many other technology revolutions. Okay, so one more question. We are a little bit behind the schedule. We are taking some time for the award ceremony. Sorry, Antonio. Hello. I was going to ask about your opinion. Well, we've been talking a lot about the pressure exerted by governments, corporations, etc., and the fact that they are coercing freedoms. I think that you've said individual freedoms about what they let you and don't let you do. Do you think that the fact that the internet depends on companies that are putting the infrastructure and depends on the governments can have an influence on the fact that this reality, for example, that is the one that was saying Roman, could happen? Or do you think that we need to create our internet as a DAO? Mesh networks. No, we've been talking about this for a while, mesh networks. And if you've watched the TV show Silicon Valley, they are thinking about decentralized internet, and if the first individual freedom, and the most important one, the ones that allows the others, is the free expression freedom, the fact of depending on big centralized authorities to exert your freedom of expression, well, you can see it in China. When censorship is the first symptom of why we need a decentralized internet. So about this topic, one of the missions that countries have in Europe is to guarantee that your basic fundamental rights are not ruined by freelancers, other companies, and so on and so forth. The censorship that we have in Europe, because it exists, should be focused on guaranteeing that you, as a human being, will have a better life. The fact that there are other networks different to internet, in the internet, like Tor, for example, this fact allows you to have different ways. So maybe, well, the goal changes depending on the territory and depending on the historical time. It depends on a social agreement. The problem that we have here is the ones that decide what it is done sometimes are not touching reality. People that legislate, the legislators, do not even know what they're legislating about. At the Congress some years ago, I was asked to speak about the cookies law, and one MP asked the other, "What are cookies?" So what's that? Are they cookies? Biscuits? So in many cases, they haven't read the law that they are voting. But there are people that know a lot, like Borja Arzuaga, etc., that are there, okay? In fact, the ones that go to some groups of discussion at subcommissions at the Congress, we have the task. The legislator is not a person that is typing laws. There are people like, for example, Roman, that could be called to that could be required to help legislating. There are many old-fashioned regulations. So according to the question, will we go towards an internet that will be absolutely delinked to states? Not necessarily, but well, maybe the alternative exists, and maybe it will exist, and the village, the society will make it exist forever. But in my opinion, we'll have the state, that the company that either wants to guarantee or not the people's rights with a more political or economic goal. We'll have to cut because we are taking a lot of time. So just another challenge if you want to come along next year. So just one question. We've talked about financial issues. We've talked about legal issues. What happens with guardians? What happens with the security forces and military and privates? What happens with them for next year? Okay? Thank you very much.